Every witch will eventually be exposed to the symbols of the labyrinth and the maze as spiritual concepts. In modern English, maze and labyrinth are synonymous to one another, able to be used interchangeably. However, a very long history and line of mythological reference leads both scholars and pagan folk to make a distinction between the two. A maze is a puzzle with complex branching patterns and multiple choices of direction that gives the puzzler the ability to choose their path. Labyrinths, however, require no puzzling, with only one path to engage in. Both symbols together form two sides of the same coin, serving as liminal spaces. A labyrinth has one threshold that serves as both entryway and exit. The path of a labyrinth is a spiral, with the way out the exact same route in. Labyrinths today are worked with as meditative spaces, allowing pathwalkers to either focus their mind in deep contemplation or allow oneself to fall into a meditative flow state of mind. A flow state is when a person is completely immersed in whatever they're doing. I really loved Wikipedia's definition, actually, of flow. They said, quote, "Flow is characterized by the complete absorption in what one does and a resulting transformation in one's sense of time. Flow is the melting together of action and consciousness." End quote. And quite frankly, that is my most favorite flow state definition I have ever come across, because while it can be accessed through so many different modalities and will vary person to person, I think it really summed up the key essences of flow perfectly. Action and consciousness, becoming one. When in a flow state, your body is bodying on what seems like autopilot, but in the best way. Oftentimes, flow is compared to hyperfocus, and much like labyrinths and mazes, they're similar, but flow always leaves the person in a positive state, characterized by the person's complete presence and enjoyment in what they are doing. Hyperfocus, however, can leave a person feeling like they had no control over the direction and intensity of their focus, oftentimes feeling like they couldn't have pulled themselves out of the hyperfocus state. In a labyrinth, the need to pay attention and choose a path has been removed. And when walked at a steady pace, the natural left and right movement of the pathwalker's footfall triggers the natural bilateral stimulation of the brain. This is so cool because it allows the amygdala to relax, the nervous system to relax, and it allows the walker to literally step into the flow state when you allow yourself to do so. Now, perhaps you don't have the ability to walk a labyrinth. That's okay. You can also trace a labyrinth on paper. The combination of tracing and controlled breath can definitely calm the nervous system and help one to find a relaxed and peaceful state of being. And though I've never tried it myself to reach a flow state, I believe you could probably find it in this way as well. Either way, the labyrinth has a ton of possibility for magical practice. Symbolically, the spiral flow of in and out can represent traveling between realms, the other world, the underworld, creation, life and death, the rebirth cycle, or the very essence of flow itself, which is present in so much of our world with seasons, growth, nature, or any point on a path of seeking, to name, just a few. A very simple ritual would be to print out a photo of a labyrinth, draw, project, or otherwise imagine an intent and how it aligns with the symbolism of the labyrinth in a way that relates to what you're going through and intending, and tracing that path until one finds a state of flow. And when you get to that place and you feel like you're ready to take your final wander back out of the labyrinth, visualizing or affirming out loud that you are sending the intention you have been flowing with through the vortex of energy you've created out and into the world to do its work. You could take this ritual and apply it to any walking labyrinth as well, and make it a simple or as intricate of a ritual as you'd like. I'm pretty lucky. I have a walking labyrinth 8 minutes from my house, and I personally take the labyrinth being 8 minutes away as a deepening of my journey with the symbolism of the labyrinth, because the number 8 has many overlaps in labyrinth symbolism. And this particular labyrinth I have spent a ton of time with naturally, with it being so close to me, and I feel very connected to it and the nature preserve that it resides in. I have personally hosted a few rituals there, with the last one being at Samhain last year, and it's pretty cool, or I think it's pretty cool, so I want to tell you about it. What we did was we gathered to intentionally walk a path with the crone archetype. One by one, each person took a tiny gourd, like a little pumpkin, and held it in their hands as we stood together and invoked the crone, asking her to walk with us and guide us on our path as we reached the center of the labyrinth. Before the participants entered the labyrinth, they were blessed with smoke and asked to choose a card from one of the 2 pillars that lined the sides of the door into the labyrinth. One pillar held an altar to fire and held oracle cards that aligned with that element, and the other pillar held an altar to water and oracle cards that aligned with that element. The idea was to allow the crone to guide our feet on the path while we allowed our minds to focus on the images on whichever card we drew. Once the participant reached the center, they deposited their card onto the large stone that sits there in the middle and also served as the center altar. Then they took a moment to gaze into the black mirror that I had also sat on the stone altar before offering their tiny gourds into the offering bowl for the crone, and the offering bowl sat before the black mirror. So you can glean, the intent with placing the offering bowl in front of the mirror that they were invited to take a moment with before exiting. The intent was to integrate the message of the card on the journey back out, and when they arrived back at the door, they claimed a card from the pillar of the opposite element they walked in with, and then were invited to decompress with a journal or a snack or both while the rest of the group walked their path. And at the end, I walked the labyrinth, thanking the crone and gathering the candles that I had placed around it, while also intentionally closing the circle on my exit. Funny enough, the card that I pulled on my entry into the labyrinth was all about gathering, and when I got to the exit, it was quite literally closing circle. That was the card. It was the closing circle card, which I just think I I can't make this shit up. It was so cool, and I just think it's so funny how that works. I really love that ritual, and I plan to do it again every year that I can, and every year that I'm near this labyrinth specifically. There are so many ritual options with labyrinths, and I want to share a couple that I really love here with you today. Firstly, the labyrinth could be used in any initiatory ceremony, with the leader of the group or coven in the center and the group lining the outside barrier of the labyrinth, forming a circle, with the initiate's entry into the labyrinth symbolizing a willingness to dedicate themselves to the group or the shared objectives of the group, and the exit symbolizing the initiate being reborn as an acolyte or member of the group. In that same vein, Marriages or hand fastings could be great rituals for the labyrinth, with the ceremony taking place in the center and the couple emerging unified. You could walk or trace a labyrinth to honor the turning of the seasons, contemplating the energy of the time and its reflections within you. You could do healing rituals where you charge the center to be a powerful pool of healing. I think that could be a very powerful ritual. Any of those things could work, and there's just so many other options as well. The labyrinth is a very old symbol with heaps of powerful potential. It appeared for sure on Greek coins nearly 2,500 years ago, as well as mosaics, ceramic reliefs, and even petroglyphs from Native American culture and Indian culture over vast amounts of time. More than just drawings and art, 3D labyrinths also exist across the globe, with some of the most fascinating ones existing in the Solovetsky Islands in Russia. There are 13 stone labyrinths, all within less than half of a kilometer of each other on this island, which is just absolutely buck wild on its own, but it's even more so when you consider the fact that they're speculated to be 2,000 to 3,000 years old. That is absolutely wild, and I highly recommend you look up pictures of this place. There are various physical ancient sites of labyrinths across the globe, and scholars speculate that most of them were most likely used for spiritual and religious purposes, but in some cases, like in the Netherlands, they might have been used to catch fish in the center when the tide was high. And I love that because I love the idea of such a magical symbol like the labyrinth holding a very practical use during the day, like catching fish, and then when the tide goes out, a spiritual use, like ritual in the evening time. I just love that light-dark dichotomy, that night-day dichotomy. I mean, there's just so much deep, rich symbolism in that, in my opinion. Whether it's mystery or practicality, it all really adds up to the labyrinth being a powerful liminal space, which is fluid in its symbolism, both literally and spiritually. The labyrinth plays a huge part in Greek mythology in the Odyssey, with Theseus and the Minotaur. If you know that story, you know why, but I won't get into that too much today because there might be a part 2 where I dive into this history, because there's so much more than what I've shared with you, and I really want this episode to focus on the magical properties of these symbols. So if you are interested in this being a part 2, please leave a comment or send me a DM on Instagram, which will be linked in the show notes below. I love the historical part of things, and I want to share that with you, but I don't want to overshadow the magic of it either. So I would love your feedback on what you like, what you don't like. I'm open to hearing it all, and definitely let me know if you want a part 2. Before we move on to mazes, if you're interested in finding a labyrinth near you, I will link this wonderful website in the show notes called labyrinthlocator.com, because some wonderful human or humans have used the internet for good and compiled a list of labyrinths in the United States and potentially outside of the US, but I'm not sure. But you can search your zip code and see what is in your area or closest to your area. And before we completely go, I just want to really quickly tell you that, I am a neurospicy human being. So it usually takes me a full 3 completions of walking the labyrinth before I can get to that flow state. So if you decide to try walking a labyrinth for yourself, please don't give up after one pass. Just trust me, like meditation, it could take a bit of practicing and getting into that mode of allowing yourself to really relax, because that has been historically something that's hard for me to do. So just trust me, you can get there. It might just take a couple of times before you do. Now, while the labyrinth represents a cyclical energy, the maze represents milestones and a destination and what it takes to get there. A labyrinth could be archetypally represented by the fool's journey, from fool to magician, back to fool again. But a maze harkens to the hero's journey and the challenges, archetypes, and rewards found along the way. While the magician may find endless subjects to study forever, oftentimes the hero traditionally makes one grand journey where they go and are forever changed. Frodo had one ring and all that. Mazes, physical mazes, became popularized in the Elizabethan period, which was the late 16th century or about 400 years ago. Hedgerow mazes entertained courtiers, and corn and wheat mazes were popularized with the common folk. In France, in the late 1600s, the poet Jean de La Fontaine, I'm not French, so I'm so sorry if I killed that, released his version of the very popular Aesop's Fables, because there was a resurgence of interest in the beast fable folktales of France at this time. Because of how popular they were, it caused the king's advisors, King Louis XIV, to redesign the hedge maze at Versailles to serve the Dauphin, or the prince, in his education. So the somewhat forgotten hedge maze got a makeover. It was fantastic, redesigned to include 39 fountains, each with their own sculpted depiction of one of Aesop's fables. These fountains had plaques that told each story of the fable beside it, so one could read the tale and then view it played out in images on the fountains. And all of these plaques were written by the king himself. And if that doesn't sound impressive enough, there were also 333 statues depicting characters from Aesop's fables throughout the maze by the renovation's completion. Once completed, it was called the Labyrinth of Versailles. Even though it wasn't a labyrinth, it was a maze. This was a call back to the labyrinths of ancient cultures, and it was meant to inspire, allure, and wonder, and it worked because it was wildly popular. 100 years later, the hedge maze and all its fountains and statuary were removed and replaced by an exotic tree garden in the English style. And I work with plants every day, and this seems like an obviously lame choice, but, not my palace, so. The symbolism of the maze is representative of blockages, challenges, trials we face along our journey. It could also represent milestones and things like that. I feel like blockages and challenges sometimes have a negative connotation, but they don't have to be negative, right? We can reframe them to look at them as, milestones and levels that we reach on our journey of growth and wisdom. I think a fun group ritual with a maze would be have folks dressed as different deities or archetypes standing in each dead end of the maze, and when a participant were to reach one of them, they offer some token or symbolic totem, divination, or maybe just a blessing before the participant moves along with their journey towards the center of the maze. To go deeper, they could ask participants questions for them to ponder that they would take with them along their path inward to the center of the maze. Good archetypes to journey with or meet in the maze could be the trickster, animal spirits, ancestor, shadow, warrior, victim, liberator, royalty, weaver, guardian, hunter, teacher, parent and child, hermit, hierophant, and so many others, all of whom can either block or progress the journey. Another interesting ritual that could be performed solo or with a group would be for the puzzler to leave something at each dead end of the maze before continuing on. Like a labyrinth, a maze is also a liminal space. Therefore, if invoked to be so, It could be a door to the otherworld or underworld, similar to the story of the descent of Inanna, where the Sumerian goddess and queen of heaven must leave a piece of what makes her divine at each gate that takes her further and further into the heart of the underworld, where eventually she must face the truth before she is ready to make a reclamation of her power. The participants could even leave pieces of whatever is weighing them down or holding them back, or, insert intention here at each gate or dead end before moving on. When they finally get to the center, a strong vocal declaration of who they are now and what they're reclaiming could be deeply moving and transformative magic. The point of a maze is to seek the center and all of the symbolism that comes with seeking within. After you seek the center and you take that knowledge attained there back to your world, you emerge as the hero, ready to transmute that which you have gleaned into wisdom. And folks, that is all I have for you today. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. A little bit more casual, a little bit shorter. So do let me know how you feel about this style of episode. I'm probably going to be dropping some of these in between my very long researched episodes. And I also want to just not forget why I started this podcast, which was to, inspire and bring together and, offer tools for magical practice. So if you want a part 2, you let me know. And if you would, leave a comment, a rate, or a review, those are always super helpful and help me reach more folks. If you are on Spotify, know that I am going to be looking and reading at all of the comments that are left. And I also want to just quickly say hello to Australia and hello to New Zealand and all of my new listeners there. I was so tickled when I, saw my statistics, analytics, whatever, and saw that we had reached that far. And also the Netherlands. Hello, Netherlands. I am just so honored that y'all are listening to me. And I am just happy to show up for you all again today. It's been a pleasure, and I am sending warm wishes to all of you on this dark moon. And until next time, my dear one, many, many blessings to you.